This is the fifth state winning headlines. Your media police post coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya, from the Fort Hall School of Government. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at some of the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 5th of February 2021, and I am 2M.
I am CS.
And I am JM. In case you missed the headlines this morning, here they are. In the Daily Nation, is this the end of Uhuru RUTO? In the Standard, Uhuru's dismay at RUTO's impatience. And in the Star, Uhuru men push for Musalia presidency. Now I say we take the Daily Nation and the Standard together.
Absolutely.
Let me begin with the Standard very briefly.
Yeah.
Yesterday marked the first anniversary since the death of our former president, Daniel Arap Moi. And while speaking at the memorial service, the president, who led Kenyans in marking this anniversary, said that he's getting increasingly worried at the rising political intolerance and the ethnic tensions that are flaring in the country. And he's saying that he's not liking what he's seeing in the caliber of leadership. Yeah. The Sonkos of this world, for example. He didn't refer to Sonko, but I imagine it is people like those, yeah, who he termed as arrogance, people who are arrogant rather, and people who are not quite looking the way they should to take over from him in leading the country. So we also had Kalonzo, who called Sonko out, yes, and he actually said that RUTO was the one to blame, yes, for Sonko's recent accusations, yes, and his his terrible utterances towards the president and other people in leadership, and he asked for forgiveness on his behalf.
And another thing that Kalonzo says that I take note was quite similar to what was said by the National Security Committee of Parliament yesterday, was the warning on inciting people along class lines. Yes. This was something that was also noted by Kalonzo.
So that's the Standard, 2M. Yes. Do you want to give us a bit more info from the Daily Nation?
Yes, Daily Nation. Along the same theme of yesterday. Is this the end of Uhuru RUTO? And yes, the Standard, I mean the Daily Nation is telling us that the president seemed to be taking a shot at his deputy yesterday, and he gave you know, a historical background. When Jomo was president for 15 years, the man behind him, Daniel Arap Moi, was fully behind him and very respectful until Jomo died and Moi assumed office. And even then, Kibaki was very respectful to Moi as VP, all until when Moi became, you know, he retired and Kibaki became president. Kibaki really respected Moi and took care of him. And so were the other deputies. The only dissident and rebellious deputy vice president that this country has ever had is none other than William RUTO. This simple as that. And guys, I think we should just stop saying he's rebellious. I think the conversation of getting RUTO out of government must begin now, because you cannot have parallel processes while you're in government. You are serving the same government, and you're still attacking the same. You're attacking your boss. You're attacking government. You're saying government has failed, and you're part of that government, and you allow your allies to continuously abuse the president. That is dissidence. That is rebellion of the highest order, and I do not know why there is no impeachment motion in Parliament on the floor of the House right now.
Yeah, absolutely. The moment that he announced his candidature for president, it was a declaration of war. That's what happens in any ordinary political system, in any parliamentary system.
Yes.
If today the Conservative, you know, number 2, the deputy Conservative leader in the British system of parliament decides he wants to now become the next leader of that party and to become prime minister, what do? You fall out. You know, resign from your post, and you go and you challenge the current leadership. Absolutely. But you can't do that from within your post, within government. That's what you're saying to him.
Precisely. And William RUTO, without the deputy presidency, is zero. Without him staying in that house in Karen, zero. Without him having GSU elite guarding him, zero. He should be Raia by now.
Absolutely.
It reminds me of a saying that those who do not respect authority do not deserve to be in authority.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Very well put. I want to ask that we put these in the parking bay as we consider what's in the star. But we have a three-part criteria that we use to assess the headlines: topical or speculative, repetitive or groundbreaking, and finally thoughtful or just plain lazy. Let's look at the star.
The Star chooses to focus on succession politics, tells us that Uhuru men push for Musalia presidency. They are telling us that there is an elaborate scheme to make Musalia a formidable candidate, and that Jubilee insiders have been seen visiting Musalia's office. Now, I find this article to be quite speculative because I don't know how they've decided it's an elaborate scheme. They have not told us, and we don't know why they've decided two people visiting Musalia's office should be characterized as Jubilee insiders.
The envelope journalism.
You know what there's it's a simple. The Star has a new owner, and the new owner, if they would not be paid if they did not publish headlines like this.
Yes.
And the intention here is very clear for everyone to see. They just want to drive a wedge between Raila and Uhuru.
He who pays the piper
Calls a tune.
On that account, toss the Star. Daily Nation, is this the end of RUTO and Standard? Uhuru's dismay at RUTO's impatience? Whom do we give it to?
Can you give it Daily Nation?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the end. Okay, on to the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. We've got a three-part criteria that we use to assess them. Are they humorous or dry, satirical, pessimistic, and effective, or just plain lazy?
Yes.
Daily Nation. What do we have?
This is Ndula, and it's a caricature of Uhuru Kenyatta in a red Jubilee car, and the car is smoking out, and it got a puncture. And Raila Odinga has come out to fix the puncture, but on his way out, he met William Ruto standing on a wheelbarrow, and Raila is telling him it's your fault, not the driver. And the car seems to be smoking. It's just broken down. I mean, come on, Dula. The man who has broken down, if at all it is broken, and I don't think it is broken, the dissident himself is William Ruto.
Yes.
But I think that one, toss
that one,
yeah.
Right away.
Absolutely.
Now, what do we have in the Standard? Let me go through this. It's a caricature of Sonko crying in a cell in Committee Maximum Prison, which, as you can see, is in a poor state, has a bucket for a toilet at the corner, it's just crying out loud. And the caption here says, "You should have listened when, as a governor, we advised you to carry out prison reforms." Yeah, it's humorous.
I think I like that. Yeah.
It's humorous, it's effective.
Absolutely.
We'll put that in the parking bay.
Absolutely.
What do we have in the Star?
In the Star, we have that old adage, out of the frying pan into the fire. And Sonko is somehow falling deep into a big flame of fire. And in the background, we see a person in the name of Waititu with his mouth taped shut.
Yes.
And I think this is alluding to an interview some time back when former Governor Waititu said that Sonko is crazy and can say anything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Waititu remained quiet after he got impeached. Now he seems to have a new lease of life. Now a friend from Nairobi is wallowing in committee.
And I think that tape on his mouth also is alluding to the fact that politicians should be wary about incitement.
Yes.
They should indeed. Do we have a winning cartoon? Should we give it to the Daily Nation?
I think we give it to
the Standard.
The Standard. Actually the Standard.
Yeah,
let's get to the Standard.
Gado.
Yes.
So Gado gives us our winning cartoon. And now, on to our final thought. But before we get there, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And so, what is our final thought?
Now, our final thought, it is inspired by a book entitled End of Poverty by Jeffrey Sachs.
Yes, but once again, just before we get into that, let me recap what we've been talking about this week. This week, we've been talking about achieving development goals. On Tuesday, we looked at We the Peoples, a UN for the 21st Century by Kofi Annan. And that report laid out a vision for the United Nations in the age of globalization. In the report, he attempted to identify the main challenges that plague the international community as it entered the 21st century. Then on Wednesday, we looked at the book Banker to the Poor, Micro-Lending and the Battle Against World Poverty by Muhammad Yunus. And that book is an autobiography of the 2006 Nobel Peace Prize winner and the Grameen Bank founder, Muhammad Yunus. And we explored the success of micro-lending that was birthed by Yunus's desire to reduce poverty in Bangladesh. Finally, on Thursday, our final thought was inspired by a speech coined the Peace Speech by John F. Kennedy. In the backdrop of the Cuban Missile Crisis, President Kennedy, we saw, decided that he needed to do something as a leader of the United States to pull the world from the possibility of war. And so today we talk about Jeffrey Sachs. Now, Jeffrey Sachs, at the age of 28, was given a professorship in economics at Harvard University. And today he runs the Earth Institute at Columbia University and serves as special advisor on the Millennium Development Goals to the UN Secretary General. And this book, The End of Poverty, was written in the year 2005, and it is a guide to ending extreme poverty. And we'll interrogate whether this guide is accurate, whether it is useful or not. And I'll just talk about the way that he begins the book. The first thing he says is inequality today is not what it was. It's not as huge as it was 200 years ago. Yeah. And so he says 200 years ago, the disparities in wealth were not as huge. Most people, regardless of where they lived, were pretty poor. The differences in poverty between Africa and Europe were quite small. However, as some countries rapidly developed during the Industrial Revolution, they ended up leaving others behind. And so the Industrial Revolution really is the turning point in world history that ushered us into an era of great significant divide, a huge rift between the haves and the have-nots globally. There were technological advancements made in transport and manufacturing and in energy, and that allowed a lot of countries to generate revenue and wealth a lot faster. And so as a result, he comes up with some classifications on poverty, classifying the degrees of poverty that different world populations are in. He says 1 billion are in extreme poverty as at the time of writing this book. 1 billion are in extreme poverty. 1.5 billion are in moderate poverty. Moderate poverty is people who live on less than $1 a day. Then 1.5 billion are in also in that category, just a little higher, living on $1 to $2 daily. Yes. And then you've got like 2.5 billion in the middle class, yes, who can afford a decent quality of life, some shelter, TV, and a mode of transport such as a boda and the like. And lastly, he says the reason we remain poor, as poor nations such as those of us in Africa, is because of something called the poverty trap. It's a vicious cycle that prevents people like us from pulling ourselves out of impoverishment. He says we don't have the tools for economic growth and prosperity. He says we lack innovation and we suffer brain drain. He says also that our demographics work against us. We have very high birth rates, which lead to lower economic growth. Can you please deconstruct this guy?
Oh my goodness.
Now, what we also know about Jeffrey Sachs is that he's a development economist, and other than having worked on crafting the Millennium Development Goals and being an advisor to the UN Secretary General, he also advised a lot of countries, especially in the 90s, and particularly countries that were former Soviet Union countries transitioning into capitalism. This includes Poland, Slovenia, Estonia, Russia under Boris Yeltsin, and also Bolivia. And now the approach that he takes and he advocates is what he calls clinical economics. And it's a case-by-case basis approach as opposed to a one-size-fits-all model of development. And we can see why he advocates for this based on the work he's done in various countries and even the categorization you gave us, JM, earlier. He gave examples from different countries. Now, you know, his ideas would be more believable if the countries he had advised had, you know, achieved a significant progress. Even in his book, which was written in 2005, he gives an ambitious target of 2025 being when we end extreme poverty. That's 4 years away. And even the countries he advised in the 90s are still suffering serious cases of extreme poverty. And I'd like to take the example of one country. He advised Bolivia, particularly with respect to its inflation rate, and helped cut the inflation rate down from 4,000% to 0%. Now that in itself is impressive. However, there was still extreme poverty, and a lot of people didn't really feel the difference in that. And so what we're saying here is, I think what is important is a more holistic approach by government. And I think looking at what is happening back home, certain serious questions are being asked along the lines of equity as opposed to equality. Our constitution requires equity and equitable distribution of wealth, for instance. So when we're talking about things like revenue sharing, you know, we're thinking about how a child in Northeastern getting a bursary allocation would get something similar to a child down in Machakos, for instance. But if you give the same sort of revenue allocations to all counties, when you have population differences, when you have differences in land mass, when you have, you know, historic injustices such as the places that receive the equalization fund, it's very important to look at a holistic approach and not just certain economic indicators like inflation rates.
You know, Chaka, you said 2025 we end world poverty, extreme poverty. Is that what you said?
Yes.
So I mean, I think then this guy should visit RUTO. RUTO has a plan: wheelbarrows and poverty. You know, there's something about this Sachs man that doesn't sit well with me, and maybe that's because he sees poor Africa in light of malaria, AIDS, corruption, and generally what your ordinary Muzungu would spew. But I like that he's honest about the role colonialism played in the development of Britain and Europe in general. However, I won't talk too much about colonialism. I'm more interested in the reasons why Britain developed faster than any other nation in Europe by the 1820s. Sachs attributes Britain's rapid advancement to largely three things. One, Britain was Europe's hub for technological innovation, which was critical in its industrial revolution. Two, Britain had coal. It could power every aspect of its economic needs. And three, Britain guaranteed individual freedoms and the protection of private property. Now, in as much as I agree with the three, I think Sachs fails to see the bigger picture. And the bigger picture here is money, cash. How did Britain finance the Industrial Revolution, for example? And the answer is debt. In fact, Britain's debt to GDP ratio in 1820 was 200% of its GDP. Why was this the case, right? Before the Industrial Revolution, Britain's nobility, the rich and mighty, had invested in land. Status was tied to land ownership. As an investment, land was oversaturated and offered less of a return in profit. Land, for instance, yielded about 2% in profit every single year. Now, the nobility who were the owners of things and linked to the British Empire noticed that those that moved to the city to make steel, to manufacture, to do industries, made more in profits than they ever made from land. But because they were asset rich and cash poor, they had to borrow. Soon, the empire dished out government paper, not just to bolster the war economy, but to encourage the rise of industry. Soon there was a rush of labor from farms to the city. Peasant farmers rushed to industries to earn higher wages. At the time, Britain had Europe's largest debt, but profits from industries soared and industries grew like never before, making Britain Europe's most advanced economy. And by the way, the part of the debts Britain took in 1820 was actually paid in 2015, just 5 years ago. That's why I keep asking Kenyans why they whine about debt like it's such a bad thing. When accountants like David Day tell us, oh, Kenya's debt is 70% of GDP, and paint a picture of gloom. please be aware, they are lazy thinkers. If Britain did it over 200 years ago, sisi ni nani? Man not doing it should not interrupt man doing it.
Oh yes, 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 absolutely,
Well said.
absolutely. The other thing that Sachs says
Yeah.
is that, you know, the reason we're poor is because we are lazy people as Africans.
Yeah.
But to that, Professor Hajrum Chang says we are not poor because we are lazy. We are lazy actually because we are poor.
Wow. Wow.
Because we are not sufficiently occupied
Yes.
in things which we deem meaningful
Yes.
as productive economic activities.
Yeah.
Now, today, ladies and gentlemen, we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation and a winning cartoon from the Standard. I want to leave you with a quote, and this is unsolicited advice for William RUTO. The minute you get the idea that you are indispensable, you aren't. Have a good